The iMore Show is brought to you today by Walter. That's Waltr, Walter. It's the first Mac app in the world that lets you upload MKV and FLAC files directly to your iPhone and iPad for native playback. There's no additional iOS app required, no additional Mac apps required to convert your videos. You just drag and drop. You might have heard of this because this is the app that discovered that their iPhone 6 was capable of 4K video playback, which is really, really cool. And the name, yes, was inspired by Walter White from the TV show Breaking Bad. You can learn more about this at softorino.com/Walter. That's SOFTORINO.com/WALTR. Thanks, Walter. Thanks, Softorino. Hey everyone, it is December 23, 2014. I'm Rene Ritchie, and right now we're going to talk about the best stories, the most important stories, the biggest stories of 2014. This is the iMore Show. Joining me this week, we have on location in a paint factory, Serenity Caldwell. How are you, Ren?
Hi, it is very loud in here because right now next door I'm in my parents' half-finished new house where there's painting going on and a vacuum which just turned off. Maybe it'll turn off for the rest of the podcast. Otherwise, I'm doing great. It is 80 degrees here in lovely California. I am enjoying it. I have a view of both a pool and the mountains from my house, from my parents' new house. So I'm, doing all right, except for the fact that I'm balancing precariously on a half-finished desk that may fall apart at any moment.
Home for the holidays, but it's a holidays full of mirth and wonder.
Yes, that would be the ticket.
Also joining us, still at home on the Cape, Peter Cohen. How are you, Peter?
I am well, Rene. How are you?
I am doing very well, thank you. Your Mac Hall of Fame went over gangbusters. All the Mac devs were super happy.
I'm very pleased that we were able to incorporate Mac coverage into the Hall of Fame this year. And I think the 10 inductees that we've got represent a really nice, wide, diverse spread of the Mac development community and are certainly worthy of accolades for the various products that they've made over the years.
Agreed. And we have 10 new Mac inductees, 5 new iOS inductees, and I'll put a link in the show notes for anyone who wants to check them out. We also have joining us from the middle of winter itself, Ali Kazmucha. How are you, Ali?
I'm good, but I feel like the winter is lies because it's 50 degrees here right now, which is confusing and nice at the same time.
I don't know. Someone tried to give you a raisin this morning and it almost ended civilization. So
I know. Who buys raisin muffins? Not good.
People who like raisins. People who have taste.
Peter, who are those people? Those
Peter,
people
mute yourself.
Oh, so what I want to know is, Peter, what do you think about golden raisins?
Yeah.
I'm fine with. You mean sultanas?
Well, no, because you hate gold, but you like raisins.
I like golden raisins. I don't hold anything against golden raisins just because they were born to an unfortunate color.
He doesn't like gold aluminium.
Okay, so gold aluminium raisins would be verboten.
Yeah, gold aluminium raisins might be a little tough to chew.
Too many jokes. All right, so we are talking about the best, biggest stories of 2014, and we're going to start right at the top. For me, one of the biggest stories of the year was Tim Cook, and it was made all the better, all the sweeter a story because we had to put up with a couple of years of the stupidest articles I've ever read about Apple. Tim Cook should be fired. Apple is doomed. The stock is plummeting. We need to have a shareholder activism. It was one dumb story after another, and now we're at the end of 2014, and I'll start with you, Ren. And not only is Apple stock at the highest price ever, but Tim Cook did probably the best op-ed I've seen from an Apple executive ever.
Yeah, I mean his op-ed, which we can call unofficially the coming out op-ed, but really it was a celebration of who he is and who Apple, what Apple should be. He went from, a lot of people very skeptical about Tim Cook taking the reins, unleashing, rumors of big new products. What could these big new products be? And by the end, he's made almost we keep on seeing new lists come in every day. Person of the year, top CEO of the year. He's done a lot, not just for Apple. I mean, obviously, Apple is in a great place right now. Even with bugs, OS 8 and or iOS 8 and Yosemite have launched to pretty great acclaim. The iPhone 6 and 6 Plus are fantastic devices. It's like, not to say that they're without flaws, but they're, all in all, this year was kind of the Retina iMac. It was a slam dunk for Apple hardware and software, and they have the Apple Watch coming up next year. So there's a lot in the pipeline. Tim Cook was not kidding when he's like, oh yeah, we're working pretty much noses to the grindstone over here. And then of course there's what he's done socially, both in making a statement and allowing giving Apple more of a charity-friendly face, giving Apple employees who are, LGBT friendly a place to march in the Pride Parade and showing public support for all of that. And then his op-ed later in this year, he's made a public statement about just what kind of CEO he wants to be. And I think the majority of the majority of the tech press and the tech community is very impressed with such a thing. There are the haters. There will always be the haters. But I think overall he's made a really, really strong stand. I'm looking forward to what he does in 2015 and what the company does in 2015. And good on you, Tim Cook. There were some big shoes to fill, and you didn't just fill them. You polished them up and made them into your own shoes. And disasters and glories alike. I think it's been a really exciting 2014 in that regard.
I was doing research for the Hall of Fame, and I came across an article from 2008 where Apple PR was saying that the problems with connection to 3G networks would be fixed, and there'd be a quick patch come out. And all this stuff is nothing new. But Peter, you've been following Apple, I would say, for a long, long time. But I don't want to, overstate the obvious. But you've been covering them since the return of Steve Jobs, and it's interesting to me that because he got compared to Steve Jobs so much at the beginning, but he's such a different person. Steve Jobs was bombastic. He was, it just works. And Tim Cook has taken this. He comes out and he states Apple's values. He states we believe. And it's an incredible contrast, but it also seems to be incredibly effective.
Indeed, yeah. I think, in many cases, Steve sort of shied away from making bold moral statements about Apple, positioning about Apple as an entity. He was more interested in seeing the product sort of reflect Apple's philosophy towards its customers and towards the world more than anything. But under Tim Cook, we've seen Apple really change direction in very dramatic ways. One of those is that, Apple now contributes a lot more publicly to various charities than it used to. It also does, employee matching for those things and so on. And Tim Cook's comments put him out in front and center in a way that very few CEOs, especially very few tech CEOs, have been willing to do. And it's a unique position. It's a position that I think Tim Cook is in some ways lucky or fortunate that he can do because Apple is such a high-profile company. So I think the long and short of it is that Tim is enjoying and is publicly embracing more his role as this CEO of a very high-profile company in a way that we haven't seen before. So in that respect, 2014 was a real sea change year for Tim Cook, and it'll be interesting to see how this evolves going forward.
Ali, so here's the thing that some people find interesting. Should the agenda and the personality of a CEO, should that be reflected in the company? Because some people believe that a CEO should just exist as a CEO, that we should never know the person behind that. Yet Apple's always had very public-facing CEOs. What do you think? Is this good for us that he is being so active personally as well as professionally?
I think in this instance, yeah, but I think just like anything else, there's a fine line. So I think it's a fine line to walk, and I think that Tim Cook has been tasteful in how he's talked about some of his private life and how he's handled company affairs and how he's kind of made Apple. I think Apple, the way Tim Cook presented it to me, it was more of a welcoming environment. It wasn't this is what I think and this is what our company thinks. And I think that's what makes the difference. It's how it's presented and how tastefully someone chooses to do that. Now, I can name some CEOs that have gotten up on stage that probably shouldn't speak on behalf of an entire company's moral or ethical policies. So I think it's very individual, and it goes from company to company, and it depends on how someone broaches that subject as to how well it's received.
I think I think it's been a blockbuster year for him and Apple, and I like very much the relationship that the two have established together, and I like that they're promoting. Apple is one of the most powerful companies in the world, and that power can be used to make money and is used to make money. But if it can also promote social change, equality in the workplace, inclusivity, diversity, all the things that would be better for us as people, frankly, they can help us grow up as people.
Absolutely,
I think that's terrific. Ren, you mentioned the watch previously. That's our second story. I have not known you. I've known you for several years now, but I've never known you to be as excited for an Apple product as I've seen you for the watch.
Yeah, it's really something that's got me very, very intrigued, and it's got the gears sort of spinning in my head. When I first saw the iPad back in 2010, that was my first big, since I've been covering Apple, my first big kind of this could be so cool, because the iPad at the time looked like it would be the perfect portable drawing tool, and being a fairly prolific sketcher, that was something that I was really, really excited about, and really hoping that there'd be good apps developed for that small niche market. The watch is something entirely new, which is to say that it's a platform, it's an experience, it's a way to interact that we haven't quite seen before. There's the touch screen, and the digital crown sort of has feelings of analog buttons and switches and things of the like. But at the same time, it's so different than what Apple has come up with recently, that I can't help but be really, really excited about the promise of the watch. And someday I will write, probably closer to the watch's release, I will write the piece of why exactly I think that the watch is just so exciting. But the TLDR version is just that I really do think that it allows us to step away from the land of screens, where I go to a restaurant and I'm constantly checking my phone or doing something on it. I saw Boyhood yesterday, which I don't know if you guys have seen that, but it's a Richard Linklater movie. It's very good. And at one point there's a scene of these two teenagers in the car, and one of them's on their phone, and they just have this discussion of are you really there when you're talking to me and you're also looking at a screen and doing something else? Are you really are we really having this conversation? Are we really connected? And the thing that really that excites me about the watch is I think there's a way to balance the internet of being connected to the internet, being, having that pulse in your life without it taking over your life and taking over your physical interactions day to day. I feel like the iPhone is a lot more intrusive than the watch could potentially be, and the watch could help us kind of despite the fact that, in theory, you have a device that's around potentially 24/7 and would theoretically be in more of your life. I think it's actually a way for us to disconnect by only highlighting the things that are truly important that we want to pay attention to, whereas I feel like the iPhone, it's great that it can do so many things. It's great that we can multitask, an application switch and jump around, but I also think it's made us into frenzied rabbits where we're like, oh, I'm sitting in the car, let me get directions to go to this restaurant, and before I know it, I've checked Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and all right, directions. Exactly. And crossing roads and maybe directions if I can find it. But I feel like with the watch, because you kind of have to be so single focused with it, there's the potential for Twitter time and Facebook time and Instagram time for that to become specific time rather than, oh, I'm checking this subconsciously because I just happen to have the screen open. So I don't know. I find that potential really, really exciting. I obviously don't know how it's going to work in practice because I've gotten 10 minutes of playtime with it, and that was with a guided demo. So I can't really say oh yes, the watch will definitively change how we interact. But it's my hope that that having the Apple Watch around will will really connect us back into the physical world in a way that I feel like the iPhone and other tablet devices have kind of drawn us away a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's on-body triage.
Yes.
Ali, Red mentioned them, but Apple also made a big and bigger leap forward with the phones this year. They've gone to 4.7 and 5.5 inch screens, something that you've had on Android devices and Windows Phone for a long time, but is brand new to the Apple ecosystem. That's literally big news.
It is. It was very big news. And as much as the iPhone 6 Plus feels so much better in my pocket, the iPhone 6, I mean, the 6 Plus, it's really, I think, one of the devices of the year for Apple. I think it satisfied that niche for people that want bigger phones, but I'm glad that Apple still has a 4.7 inch, and I'll be interested to see what they do with the 4-inch models in the years to come. But I feel like 4.7 inch is a good size for most people, but the 6 Plus satisfies that niche that Apple wasn't able to fill previously. So, sorry, Samsung.
Well, that's the thing. Apple previously made most of the money in the premium phone space. I think they were up to between 60 and 80% at one point. And the only money they didn't make was in over 4-inch screen sizes because they didn't make over 4-inch screen size. So the minute they start making those, they start taking a percentage of that. And that does put a lot of pressure on companies like Samsung, companies like HTC that were making bigger phones. But it always made sense to me because at first Apple was just on AT&T. And if you couldn't use AT&T, you had to get not an iPhone on Verizon or something. But then Apple went to Verizon, and suddenly you could have an iPhone on Verizon. Now up until this year, if you needed a bigger than 4-inch phone, you just couldn't get an iPhone. You had to get something else. Now you can get a bigger than 4-inch phone that's also an iPhone. And it's just Apple once again adding addressable markets. And they've also, by way of doing this, created this sort of elastic screen environment. It's not quite the same as WebOS or Android or other companies do it. It's using all these size classes, but it means that we're sort of liberated now, that the interface is really becoming decoupled from the hardware. And I find that infinitely fascinating. And I think, Peter, that gets us to another one of the big stories. It's Apple as technology. Apple is not a chip fab. They're not an Intel. They're not a Samsung. They're not a TMC. But they came out with the Apple A8X, which once again set the bar for mobile chips. It's got not only a custom CPU, but a custom 8-core GPU. And at the same time, they're not a display company, but they came out with a 4K desktop that is, it beat all the usual manufacturers to the market and made for a stunning display. This is a computer company who's pushing the edges of technology.
5K desktop.
5K, sorry, I apologize. I undertaken that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the interesting thing is that more and more of Apple's solutions are homegrown. It seemed like for a long time the company was, after its transition to Intel, was interested in using more and more commodity parts wherever it could. But it's hit some roadblocks there. Take a look at the Mac. The Mac, the evolution of the Mac stalled out a little bit in 2014. 5K iMac notwithstanding. The chip technology that's in Macs really didn't move too much this year, so Apple had to do other things to attract people, and it certainly succeeded. So when you've got solutions like the A8 or A8X or other technologies that are inside of Apple's products that it's rolling itself, it makes a big difference because Apple's got total control over the user experience, from the basic silicon that's getting used to the UI to the operating system. And that, I think, makes a big difference. That is a key cornerstone to what makes the Mac a unique user experience, and the iOS devices as well.
It's amazing to me that Apple got to 64-bit first. I don't think anybody saw that coming. I remember last year at the iPhone event, there were still people saying, no way, they just don't need to. And people were stuck on the memory usage. You don't need 4 gigabytes on an iPhone, but it let them have that super clean, super fast ARMv8 instruction set. It let them have all the new security protocols. It let things like Touch ID happen for them. And I feel the same way about the A8X. I don't know what I really need that for in an iPad yet, but I'm sure I'm going to benefit from it at some point. 2 gigs of memory, 8 cores.
Pixelmator.
Yeah, Pixelmator for now, but what about the day when I can run Pixelmator on half the screen and maybe, I don't know, something else on the other half, the Photos app?
Oh, don't be crazy, Rene.
That's just science fiction.
Well, that's again the size classes, all this stuff. Now, a lot of people think that Apple has this master plan that lasts decades, that they have all these technologies lined up. But the truth is, a lot of the stuff is not happens. It's serendipitous. Like auto layout is created and extensibility is made. And when people need to make these new products, they look at what they have and like, oh, we'll just take this. But oh my God, it works. And it really is astounding to me that it comes together like that. But again, it makes things like extensibility. And the old knock was that Android was ugly but usable, and the iPhone was beautiful but not that functional. And this year we saw material design come to Android, but we also saw extensibility come to the iPhone. And that means, not just, there's a lot of nice things in it, but it also means we got the call we have the custom keyboards, which we haven't had on iOS for a long time. We have the share and action extensions. The photo extensions. We have widgets in Notification Center. Ren, I'll start with you on this. This was the biggest, at least in my memory, functional upgrade to the iPhone since I think the launch of the App Store.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that the keynote, the WWDC keynote, when they kind of introduced all of this, I think we were expecting something a little less incredible, and here Apple comes out and says, all right, so we've added a couple thousand new APIs, and hey, extensibility. You know how you've been wanting your apps to talk to each other? They can now. They can talk to each other. Also, photo plugins. Also, Notification Center widgets. Also, we've made it run better. Like, they just kept on laying out, like, here are amazing things that you will take advantage of and you will love. And I think, especially with extensibility and with Notification Center widgets, this is taking a little bit of time for its true power and its true usability on iOS to really be shown. Widgets, they're kind of ended up with a slew of widgets right off the bat, and I think now that we're starting to sort through them, we can be like, yeah, these widgets are really awesome. I love the widget that auto translates anything on my keyboard. That one is pretty cool. I love the widget that allows me to, check my calendar data through Fantastical versus the stock calendar app. But in addition, we've got stuff like extensibility, which is just incredible for when you get developers who really know how to use it properly. Photo extensions have become some of my favorite things to use on the device, although I'm still waiting for Waterlog. Where are you, Waterlog? I don't understand. You were previewed.
Every time I see an update, I cross my fingers and then I check the App Store.
Did Viesco Cam put in their extensions yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Maybe no.
I think they did one set but not the other. I think they did the. Yeah. There was a lot that was the thing for me is that it fundamentally changed the way I use my iOS devices, because previously, and I've said this over and over again, but it's a year-end show, so I can be redundant. Previously, I would have to leave whatever I was doing and go to another app to do something. Go to my home screen. I would have to move around. I'd have to go hunting and gathering for functionality, and now it just all comes to me. I can answer a notification in an app. I can pull down a widget and get rid of it in an app. I can load an extend. I can do an action. I can do a share. I can do a photo effect, all right where I am. Everything is now pushing to me. It's coming to where I am. It's giving me that functionality. And I think that's the beginning of a major shift. And we're going to see it with watch apps. We're probably going to see it in the car. We're going to see it in other places. And Ali, you've been rounding up all of the apps that are using this stuff for me. Has it had the same effect on you?
Yeah, certain things more than others. I'm with Serenity with widgets. They're like basically one of my favorite things next to photo extensions. So, and there's other things that I really haven't found myself using as much. I think handoff and continuity, I use continuity calling and SMS relay a lot. Some of the other features like handoff, I don't use as much, and I think a lot of that's just due to not a lot of apps taking advantage of that yet. But photo extensions and widgets are amazing, and I wish we had them way before we did.
Yeah, Ali mentioned continuity, Peter. I mean, Apple's big theme for WWDC this year was integration, and continuity, I think, is perhaps the biggest example of that, because I think you wrote this, or I read this in one of your older pieces. It is the halo effect made manifest.
It really is. interesting thing about the evolution of iOS 8 and OS 10 up until this year was that they were on parallel tracks, and one would borrow from the other. You know, Apple did a back to the Mac press conference at one point to indicate some of the technology that it had developed for iOS that it was bringing back to the Mac. But it was always sort of give and take and always kind of in parallel. And sure, you know, there was iCloud and there was technology that made the two work together in sync, but they were separate but equal. And this was the year where Apple really tried to Rene is distracting us with Groot on his mic stand now.
Because we are all Groot, Peter.
We are all Groot. It's true. This is the year that Apple sort of adopted the we are Groot philosophy as well. By doing this with iOS 8 and with the Mac, the two of them sort of make a sum that's greater than the individual parts. It's a very interesting philosophy to see, and the more that Apple does it, I think the more successful it's going to be. You know, the problem that Allie and I have had with it, at the risk of speaking for Allie, but I think she'll agree with me, is that the continuity technology just doesn't seem really fully baked in the iterations of iOS 8 and OS 10 Yosemite that we've seen so far. We're waiting for Apple to iron out some of the reliability issues, some of the consistency issues that we're having with the technology. Having said that, when the technology works, it's incredible because it really makes your Mac work better and more successfully than your Mac could by itself. And it does the same with the iPhone as well. You know, when I'm working on a web page or when I'm looking at a web page on my Mac and I need to go someplace, I can pick up my iPhone and just in that lower left-hand corner see the Safari tab or is the Safari button, click on it and have that same web page open up in mobile Safari on my iPhone so I can keep reading as I leave. Likewise, I am a big fan of continuity calling and SMS relay. Call relay and SMS relay are easily the two most used features of continuity that I have specifically. There is barely a day that goes by where I'm not making calls from my Mac because I'm in front of my Mac almost all the time. And, you know, occasionally need to call the kids' schools or make an appointment somewhere or call my mechanic or whatever it is that I might be doing that actually requires me to physically talk to somebody. And it's much easier for me to do that from the Mac than it is for me to go hunting from my iPhone, which might be in my jacket pocket upstairs or might still be sitting on my dock cradle somewhere or charging on my nightstand. I don't have to think about that anymore. Thank you, Apple, very much for making that a reality.
I love it so much too, and Apple did so much well this year that I think it also makes the stuff that they're not doing as well stick out even more. And one of those is sort of the 2 steps forward, 1 step sideways, 3 steps back, 2 steps diagonally. That is App Store review. We had this problem in the original days of the App Store in 2008 and 2009, a little bit in 2010, where apps would come out, they'd get rejected. There was sometimes they get reapproved again. We thought those days were behind us, but now with extensibility primarily, those are coming back. And it feels like there's a disconnect at Apple, that it was technology that was created, but there are certain people in the hierarchy within App Store Review who don't believe that the way it's being used by all developers, the quote-unquote unforeseen ways, are best when it comes to user experience. And I don't want to paint them as bad guys because they really deeply care about this stuff, and they care that if you push a button in a widget and it takes you to an app, someone might get lost, not know where they are in their phone, or something will break and they'll blame Apple for it, or whatever it is. They think that these really are usability issues. But at the same time, we're getting all this wonderful technology, and it's created this environment where several high-profile apps have been rejected. pCalc was rejected, Transmit was rejected, Drafts was rejected, only to get returned back to the App Store when those people were overruled. And I think if the in the judicial system, if someone was overruled this much on appeal, there'd be questions asked. And I think it's fair to ask questions about what's going on here and now. And it strikes me that, well, there's 2 things on this. I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts, because some people believe that once again this is the end of the App Store. It's doomed. All the innovation will leave. People will be, uncertain about how to do stuff, and it's going to lead to a chilling effect. But Ren, does Candy Crush really care about that? Does Clash of Clans?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the question, right? Where I think the indie developers and the long-time Mac developers have really gotten burned as a result of these policies. But you're talking about the bigger studios, the game dev studios, the folks who are not really, they don't really care about pushing the envelope on iOS. They care about making money hand over fist by getting people addicted to their games or their, photo sharing apps or whatever. And as a result, you're getting things that maybe are not super innovative from a platform standpoint, but are definitely making money and are definitely, paying for developers' livelihoods and paying for all sorts of exciting things. Unfortunately, that leads kind of a divide, right? We stagnate the growth and the excitement of the platform if we're focused solely on the money making, right? It's the same problem with art, right? Commercial art, the Avengers can make tons and tons of money, and that's awesome. And the Avengers was a pretty good movie too. But you're talking about the difference between mainstream stuff and independent stuff that might push the medium forward. And I feel like it's really important for us to shepherd those people and to make sure that they are they can, continue pushing the envelope forward. Because think about a world in which Lauren Brichter was not allowed to put pull to refresh in the App Store, right? Pull to refresh is now used in almost every app that you can think of, and it was all because he decided to experiment with that. So I feel like making sure that Apple can properly shepherd developers while still shutting out apps that can be potentially malicious or abusing the frameworks is really important. I don't know, Peter, what do you think?
I'm inclined to agree, and I think that part of it is that Apple can't be set to a rigid hierarchy of rules the way that these things come about, because developers are going to innovate and developers have to push back. That tension needs to exist in order for the App Store system to work altogether. The good thing is that Apple does recognize when it's made a bad decision and will reverse it. These things are often brought to the public forum before they get worked out, and it may possibly get worked out more quickly because of it. I don't really know. But at the very least, Apple has backtracked when it's made a decision that clearly is not in either its best interest, its customers' best interest, or its developers' best interest. And I think that's the best thing that you can say about it. If Apple was just subscribing to an arbitrary set of rules and sticking to those arbitrary set of rules, I think there'd be a much bigger problem than there is.
Yeah, I would agree. And you also can't overshadow the fact that the iOS App Store is the largest app store on the planet. It's the largest distribution channel for mobile apps. So I think a lot of the App Store is doomed. App Store is, a lot of those are sensational headlines that serve nothing but being sensational. I think that there's a risk with anything that you develop. I mean, anything could get rejected for a numerous amount of reasons. I think we're in new territory with extensions and with Apple opening up iOS in ways that it never has in the past. So I think that's a lot of the reason that there's some attention on this, because it's never been something that's been dealt with before with iOS. So I think that there's a fine line there, just like with anything, and that it's going to take some time to figure out, okay, for developers to maybe feel comfortable again with iOS. And I think that that's going to have to be something that will have to be worked out with Apple and with developers. And if the media helps move that process along quicker, I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah, I really agree with you, Allie. I think that Apple really needs to take a step. I don't think that they need to obliterate the App Store review guidelines, because I do think that there are bits in there that are crucial to keeping the app, and even review, as painful as it is important. But I do think that we need better communication within the App Store review team, please.
Oh, please. So one thing that I think is being communicated quite well is Apple Pay. I mean, it hasn't left the blessed borders of the U.S. yet, but it is not just a convenient way to pay for things using NFC technology, but it's Apple's entry into the payment system. And Peter, that's something new for them.
Yeah, it is, and it's a potentially huge moneymaker for them. I mean, the early indication is that Apple Pay has been very successful, and I have to admit that I've had to go out of my way to use Apple Pay. Apple Pay is not at the vendors where I usually go out or do stuff normally. I mean, Panera, okay, maybe once in a while. I don't typically shop at Whole Foods. I don't use the other grocery stores that Apple has.
What is wrong with you, Peter?
Where do you get all your raisins from if you don't go to Whole Foods?
Right, exactly. Yeah, they sell them elsewhere. Come on, guys.
Oh, I wouldn't know. I don't buy them.
Look, I'm a Boston boy. I get my drugs at CVS or, the local guy on the corner. I get my groceries at Stop and Shop. I'm just a normal New Englander, and unfortunately, that technology hasn't permeated that far into us yet. CVS, of course, famously is in bed with one of Apple's competitors in Apple Pay, and has actually removed the ability for you to use Apple Pay at its NFC terminals in all of its drugstore locations. So we'll see how that plays out in 2015. But that brings me to another point, and that is that Apple Pay is something that Apple is staking an early claim on, but is definitely facing some resistance from, in some cases, big retailers like Walmart. It'll be interesting to see in 2015 and beyond how far spread Apple Pay can get. A lot of that is going to be dependent on Apple's continuing popularity with the iPhone, obviously. But right now, the only people who can use it are iPhone 6 users. And iPhone 6 users compared to all the other phone users, whether they're iPhone users or Android users or Windows Phone users, are really, that's a small percentage of overall cell phone use, which means that there's a small user base that you're talking to. Are vendors going to be content to hit that small, very activated base who wants to try out their Apple Pay, or are they going to make a play to try to capture a larger audience? It's something that I am not getting a clear idea from in my crystal ball, and I'm going to be very curious to see how that happens in 2015.
It'll be interesting to see how the Apple Watch affects Apple Pay usage as well, considering what it'll make the iPhone 5 and up compatible with Apple Pay. If you have an Apple Watch.
Well, if you have a 5 or a 5 Plus, you can authorize your Apple Watch, and then your Apple Watch is authorized for as long as it maintains skin contact with you.
Yeah, which is very, very cool.
It's so sci-fi, Ren.
I love it. Oh man, walking around. My parents, of course, just got a new house, and we're outfitting them with all kinds of sci-fi things, including the Sonos Play Bar and like the Philips Hue lights and the Nest. And like every time I show them how to do something, they're like, I can't believe this works. We're in the future. Anyway, I use Apple Pay actually quite a bit because I do shop at Whole Foods because produce on the East Coast is hard to get fresh if you don't pay out the ear for it, sadly.
I have to eat raisins. There are no living grapes.
Yeah, that is true. So I actually switched my prescriptions over to Walgreens because I got fed up with CVS for doing that. And I had an experience today where I went into a Best Buy to pick up a quick mic for the podcast, and they had a contactless reader, and I pull out my phone, and he's like, "Oh no, we can't do that here." And I'm like, "Apple Pay?" He's like, "No, our manager won't let us." Sad face. It's like this is the main barrier to entry right now with Apple Pay, is that you see a contactless reader and you get really, really excited. There are lots of contactless readers that don't officially support Apple Pay. So every time I see a contactless reader, my initial thing is just to pull out my phone and try and tap it, just to see if it works. And 50% of the time it actually does. Like I managed to pay for gas with Apple Pay, and I managed to pay for a couple.
I had this scene in my head of everyone from the Geek Squad at Chuck trying to hold Ren back, and all she's trying to do is tap.
I just want to tap my phone. Well, I really like it.
And some retailers are really going out of their way. Like, we never ever shop at Walmart. We despised Walmart for most reasons, but had to go in there for some reason, I don't know, like last week, and noticed that they actually, not only did they disable the ability to use Apple Pay, our Walmarts actually pulled the entire NFC terminal out. So they actually swapped out their readers for new readers that take no NFC payments. So not only have they, if they're thinking of going with Current C or whatever that other provider is called, now you have no readers.
Current Cut. Well, the Current Cut doesn't use NFC. It prints out a beautiful barcode or a QR code for you to scan in.
That's so safe. So safe.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is I've heard that a lot of the exclusivity agreements actually expire fairly quickly next year. So it'll be interesting to see which merchants jump happily on board. It won't be Walmart because they're right behind Current Cut, but it will be a lot of other vendors. They're going to regulate that quite quickly. And hopefully, there's been signs that Apple's hiring to get Apple Pay beyond the borders of your beautiful United States of only we can have Apple Pay. So that'll be even more interesting for me next year. Sorry. Never mind. Sorry. Go ahead.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Okay, you're just messing with me. My only question, though, Peter, is whether Apple used Apple Pay to buy Beats.
What do you mean?
Well, if they went up to Dre and they went up to Jimmy Iovine and they just tapped them both on the head and they walked away with Beats.
Wait, Jimmy Iovine has an NFC reader built in his head. That makes so much sense. It would explain.
So I know. It would explain so much.
All right, so
it's Pay Dre Day and everybody's celebrating.
Oh, boo. The Beats deal, we talk about things that haven't really materialized their full worth yet. I got really excited about the Beats deal because I really, really love Beats Music as a subscription service. I think that their curated playlists are some of the best that I've ever listened to. Harkening back to the days of really, really good 90s radio DJs who were on their stuff and knew their areas. I really dig the service, and so when Apple, bought Beats and with it the music service, I'm like, oh, good. We're either going to see iTunes Radio improved, or Beats is going to, they'll rebrand Beats and they'll keep all of these things, and it's super awesome. And so far, we haven't really seen anything. Beats hasn't shut down, which I appreciate. If it shut down, I would cry, because I really do listen to it a fair amount. But yeah, I don't know what to do here, sadly, because I'm like, come on, guys. I know you're working on things behind the scenes, but let's chop. Let's fix iTunes Radio.
I would really like to just see Apple absorb the Beats Music app into iTunes Radio. That would be my ultimate. I love the playlists and Beats. My only complaint would be I wish some of them were a little longer. Some of them are somewhat on the short side. But I love that aspect of Beats. I'm not a huge fan of Beats hardware, but their music curation service, I stuck with it even through the horrible battery drain and all of the issues when they initially launched that app, just because it was worth it. I'd actually, I would find a way to stream Beats music to Sonos through AirPlay and other weird things just because I wanted to be able to use Beats. But I'm a little disappointed that nothing's materialized. I don't know how big of a fan I am of the Beats app itself, so I think an ideal solution there would be just to roll it into iTunes, and hopefully it will come with an iTunes Match subscription instead of $10 a month.
You didn't announce any iTunes stuff this year. The iTunes stuff is all being held for next year, and as far as I know, those teams are working furiously, but iTunes really is a constraint. iTunes is an old system. WebObjects is an old system. Beats was built on new technology. The iTunes name and system is much bigger, it scales much better, but Beats technology is newer, and it's going to be a clash of cultures to get those two things sort of playing nicely together. So I don't expect anything until next year. But that's on the services side. Peter, they also are selling incredibly expensive, really bass-heavy headphones. They haven't got Lightning adapters yet, but they have got prime shelf space in Apple stores, and that is, again, incremental revenue for Apple.
Yeah, and it helps. The Beats products, not the pill so much, but the headphones are definitely status items. You see a lot of kids wearing them and coveting them. In our store, we recently started carrying them, and certainly have gotten a lot of interest from especially younger customers who see them on their favorite sports ball people, or see them on celebrities, or just see them on the street and say, I want those. And that's great. It's nice for Apple to have another trendy brand in its cachet and its portfolio. I think that that's good. On the other hand, I am not a big fan of the Beats technology. I have used Beats Studios in the past. I find them to be exceptionally bass heavy, and I don't like the digital signal processing that they use. I don't really think that their fit and finish is that good either. I've had reliability problems and all sorts of other things. So not a big fan. I'm going to be interested to see what Apple brings to the table in terms of its engineering and design sensibility for Beats in 2015. Because as Ren said at the outset, this is a deal whose material benefits really haven't manifested themselves yet. It seems to be very much a work in progress. My hope is, I think it was similar to what Ali just said, that Beats is going to continue in some distinct fashion, but we're going to see Apple better integrate the Beats music service itself into an overall option product from Apple, maybe as part of iTunes Match or iTunes Radio. I don't know. I use iTunes Radio. I can't say that I'm really that thrilled with it, but I use it because it offers me free data because I'm a T-Mobile customer, and that's really when I use streaming radio the most, is when I'm in the car and just don't feel like listening to NPR or whatever I've got on my phone at the moment. So your mileage may vary, but I think 2015 is going to be a very interesting year from that perspective.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. And one thing I like is that Beats commercials are trending the way that iTunes commercials used to be. I mean, we got the donut selfie this year. They renamed it the solo selfie for whatever reason, but at least they had the inventor of the donut selfie in the video, which was cool. I'd like to see more of that kind of advertising from iTunes as well. On the polar opposite side, Apple's other big deal this year was a partnership with IBM to get iOS more into the enterprise. iOS has had a very broad acceptance in enterprise, but not a very deep one. And they believe that maybe they have, 90, 95, whatever of the global, 500 or the Fortune 500 companies involved, but they're not involved in every department. They're not involved to a large extent in every department. So they're bringing IBM to walk them into this. And I find it, I don't know if you saw this, Ren, but when they announced the apps, they did not look at all like enterprise apps. They did not look like IBM's. It looked like Apple put HI in a bus and drove them to wherever IBM lived, and they said, okay, almost like Extreme Makeover, we're going to make this pretty now.
Yeah, let's sit down and talk about your life choices with designing this. I think this is a really awesome partnership for people in business technology fields like airlines. To revolutionize the crappy equipment that they've been using to do their jobs. I think that's really awesome. From a general consumer standpoint, you're like, a deal with IBM? Okay, I'm going to go to sleep now. This doesn't interest me the same way that Beats Music, I've heard of them. But from the corporate side, I think it's a huge deal. It's a big thing that they're doing, and the fact that these applications are now rolling out to the business sphere is really, really important. I have only gotten a chance to see a couple of them, but I know they span a fairly wide range of different applications. And they do look a lot prettier. Imagine that. It's almost as if IBM and Apple teamed up, and IBM does have the vast infrastructure needed to kind of infiltrate and get into these areas. And of course, there are already pilots and folks who want to use iPads in the cockpit and elsewhere. And by having such a big partner as IBM, basically be like, yeah, we're gonna back Apple up here, and we're gonna make sure that you have excellent software for your business that's going to be secure, that's going to be ready, and taking the onus off Apple to develop all of those things by itself. It's a very cool partnership, and I'm pretty, from a technology journalism side, I'm really psyched to see this happen. I think this is a really good move from Apple. From a consumer standpoint, it's hard to make people understand why this is awesome. It's basically like, hey, do you have a job where you have to use really terrible technology? Well, IBM and Apple are trying to make it so that certain people don't have to deal with outmoded, terrible tech.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because it's, again, more addressable markets. The same way Apple's moving into bigger phones, the same way they move into cross carriers, they're now moving into enterprise because after the China mobile deal last year, there's not a lot of low-hanging fruit for them. iPhone sales are accelerating, but at a certain point, almost everyone who wants an iPhone is going to have an iPhone, or at least the people who can easily get an iPhone are going to have it. But by moving Apple into the iPhone to like the larger screen sizes, by moving it into enterprise and the iPad as well, more addressable markets, more potential sales. Ali, it could come a time when, Heather is going out to do real estate and she has a gorgeous, gorgeous app to do it with.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too. A lot of those apps end up trickling down in some form or another. I've seen her throw tantrums numerous times over just, crap software. I mean, there were times, typically, and I don't, for realtors, they use lockboxes to open houses. They can buy those dongles for their phones to plug in and unlock lockboxes. Well, whenever you get a software update, it breaks that functionality. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things that people have to be aware of. I know so many professionals that are terrified, like Heather, to update their devices because of the fact that things break. So it would be nice to see a lot of different companies utilize things, and I think that consumer facing, it does end up, it's a trickle down effect because you get a better experience because the people that are serving you are using technology that's not out of date. I don't want to stand at a hotel counter and wait 20 minutes for them to find my reservation using Windows NT or Windows 98. So, I mean, it's a trickle down effect that affects everyone. And especially if you work in an industry where you're using crap software, it's going to affect you first. As a consumer, it will affect you later.
I love how Ali went straight for Windows NT, just no mercy, just right on it. Peter, so going from enterprise to retail, Apple's retail stores are still phenomenally successful, but some people think they're a little bit long in the tooth. They have the Apple Watch coming, and some people suggest that's going to require a different buying experience than Apple is traditionally used to. And on top of all that, you have a brand new senior vice president of not only retail, but they've now combined online and retail together. And for a long time, people have said the closest thing Apple has to a president, why would Angela Ahrendts take this job? Being head of Apple retail and online is a big job.
Yeah, I mean, lest we forget the guy who started the whole retail program, Ron Johnson, was one of the most public profile Apple executives outside of Steve Jobs for a number of years. So this is an incredibly prestigious, very high profile position. And Angela Ahrendts has impeccable credentials. She is one of the reasons why Burberry is the international brand that it is today. So I think that's telling. Burberry is a designer brand. It's got its hooks into different things, whether it's clothes or colognes and accessories. And this is an area that Apple is interested in. I'm not talking about cologne, obviously, or perfume, but I'm talking about fashion, and I'm talking about accessories. It's a huge market. It's a very potential lucrative market for Apple, especially with the watch. And it really kind of fits with the Apple aesthetic, which has everything to do with the design of the product and the actual user experience of the product, and transforming technology beyond just how we think of it in utilitarian terms, as a computer to process data, or as a phone on which to make phone calls or send messages. These are lifestyle devices in many ways, and Apple is a lifestyle brand. So it'll be interesting to see again in the future how this changes. But Ahrendts taking over the reins, that's a ship that has gone rudderless for a little while, since what's his name from Dixon's was shown the door.
Browett.
Yeah.
Was awful.
Yeah. Well, what makes better sense than to bring someone in the fashion industry that's spent years there, that has made those contacts and built that brand, that can help you? I mean, fashion is an industry that Apple doesn't know a lot about on its own. So it makes sense to incorporate someone that is really good with retail and merchandising and marketing to that crowd. I mean, iPhones are status symbols. Watches are huge status symbols. I mean, I couldn't believe when we first started doing colored iPhones, how much money people would pay.
Again, for those people not familiar, Ali created the gold iPhone when she gave one to Kim Kardashian. That she is the reason why Peter is so angry.
I mean, I can't even explain how many people will pay money to customize stuff like that. And it's all about being an individual and being, unique and different from the next person that's holding an iPhone, whether that's cases, whether that's a watch, and I think that's part of the reason Apple went the direction that they did with the watch. I mean, why release one brand when you can make it customizable and let people make it unique and to themselves from a software aspect and a hardware aspect? And I think that having someone that can head that up in retail stores makes a lot of sense, because how you present things, it matters a lot.
I think it's super important. And I think it's interesting. One of the other initiatives that Tim Cook really put some weight behind this year was inclusivity and diversity at Apple. And while admitting that they have a tremendous amount of work to do at Apple in general, we do have Angela Ahrendts now in the group that forms Voltron. She's in the senior executive group. And we also have in the second tier group, we have Lisa Jackson, the vice president of environmental initiatives, and Denise Young-Smith, the vice president of human resources. And it's so slow. It's so agonizingly slow, Ren. But the only thing worse than it being slow is for it not happening at all.
Yeah, it can be frustrating.
So hopefully we'll see that continue on and accelerate into the new year, because it really the best way to make products for everyone is to have everyone making your products. Mm-hmm. There's just no better way than that.
I agree.
So, Allie, if people want to see all your great works and find you on the social networks over the holidays, where can they go?
I am at iMore.com every day. Minus the next couple weeks, I will be on vacation.
I know.
We'll see how Rene handles that.
I'll be at CES. You're gonna have to come bail me out.
It's okay.
CES. Oh, CES.
We'll breathe.
I am at iMuggle on all of the things: Twitter, Instagram, all of the social things, pretty much.
All right, Peter. What about you?
On iMore and also on the social things at Flarg. FLARGH.
Ren?
I am at iMore.com and on all of the social things at Saturn.
All right, and you might be doing some podcasts over the holidays, or is there anything coming your way?
That's true. I believe that keep your eyes peeled if you're a fan of The Incomparable for something special in a few days. I'm sure we will probably also do a podcast on the Doctor Who Christmas special. I hear there might be some crazy stuff. Just keep your eyes on Twitter.
They're all going to go.
Things might be afoot.
They're going to go caroling at Syracuse's house just to see how he handles it.
Yes, we're going to do a musical caroling episode. You have been warned.
On roller skates.
Nice.
Yep. I did bring them.
You can find all of us at iMore. You can find me at Rene Ritchie. I want to thank everyone, every reader, every listener, every viewer for a fantastic year. You are unmatched as an awesome community. You make us all so much better, and we really appreciate you. Have happy holidays in whatever method you choose to celebrate or not celebrate them. Just have a wonderful, wonderful new year. And we will see you back at, we'll next be back at CES 2015. Talk to you all soon.
See you next year.
Bye-bye, guys.